What's going on, guys? It's Nabil back again with another video. Today's video we're going to be talking about why Las Vegas is a huge turning point for Mercedes and what it means for the future and potentially the effects that it will have on the W15 with James Allison. To start, let's talk about the Mercedes in general. We know how the Mercedes operates. I mean, just last race in Brazil, they had arguably their worst race in this new generation era of cars in many years. Toto Wolff said in 13 years pretty much since he's been in charge. And the main thing that they struggled with in Brazil was the straight line speed. It was simply the draggiest car on the track, and they've been struggling with this all year, not just this year, last year, and it's been something that they haven't been able to address. It's been something that's been really hampering them, even on tracks where they're fast. Skipping into Las Vegas, rightly so, it was an amazing race, but I think the pace of the Mercedes was not actually truly shown. And we'll look at some figures now from the data analysis, formula data analysis, starting with the straight line speed. If we look here, out of the top teams, Red Bull is the only team to actually have more straight line speed than the Mercedes at 348 kilometers per hour, Mercedes at 347. This is a significant difference, a big change from one race to another. I think it highlights how susceptible to set up the W14 is and how important it is to get the setup right. But more importantly, I think it demonstrates the effects of James Allison's update, which was brought in the Texas GP. The reason Mercedes haven't been able to run a low downforce car is many times when they do bring the downforce down, we look at Spa, we look at Monza, they just sacrifice too much downforce through the corners and they lose too much time through the corners, and that just makes them completely uncompetitive. And when you compare that with the Red Bull, who were able to run a more loaded rear wing, you look at Perez, who had even higher downforce than Verstappen had, but you look at how much grip they have. They grip in throughout the corner, the slow speed, they have so much grip, and that's with a low wing. So the Mercedes, they are not able to do this to the same extent, and I think this race highlights a change in that. The Mercedes was clearly running a low rear wing, and in qualifying they were even faster than the Ferraris. The Ferraris were kilometers slower than the Mercedes during qualifying, and I think that actually is a huge change. I think that's something that the Mercedes team can be pleased with back in Brackley, that they've been able to slightly address this and bring some performance to the car, which is clearly the setup they've got completely in the right window. I mean, let's not forget, before coming into this race, you know, we were expecting the Mercedes to have the worst race of the season in Las Vegas. I mean, you look at the track map, you look at the circuit, nothing about it suits the W14. It's long straights with some corners which are high speed, and we know the W14 doesn't perform well in these types of circuits. What's more shocking is not that the Mercedes is running more straight line speed, it's actually the fact that they've got such low drag to come with that, and they're actually not sacrificing much grip at all in the corners. And I think this is something that can clearly propel the team forward. Now sure, we look at the performances from Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, it wasn't the best weekend. In fact, it was a bad weekend from the Mercedes pair. I mean, George performed decently in quali, getting to third, good performance. Lewis, on the other hand, in 11th, and a pretty terrible race. But if we look at the pace of that Mercedes car in clean air, it was actually definitely a podium-worthy car, and second to maybe only the Red Bulls. If we look at Sector 3 throughout the race and even qualifying, you can see here that the Mercedes was clearly the fastest team in the third sector. And that's something that we need to talk about, because it's literally just straight in Sector 3. You know, there's not much else yet. There's quite a significant difference between Lewis Hamilton in that third sector and even Max Verstappen or Perez or Leclerc. You know, he's got a couple tenths there. Now, what does that come down to? We know that the W14 is very good under acceleration. If you guys were watching the race, when we were on board with Max Verstappen, you even saw him behind George Russell coming out of the chicane, coming out those low speed corners, and you just saw on acceleration, George was able to put quite some distance between him and Verstappen, even though coming into the apex, you know, Verstappen would be 2-3 tenths behind. Now, let's get on to why this is very important for the future development of the W15 and potentially for 2024. The Mercedes this year and last year, there's been a key pattern, and I think that's high downforce tracks where Mercedes often performs well. You look at Brazil last year, you look at Hungary this year, you look at Zandvoort this year, you look at Qatar even. Whenever there's been a high downforce track, you've seen that Mercedes are often much closer up the front end, and Ferrari, the opposite is true. And one of their Achilles heels has been the straight line speed and the high drag that they've been carrying around. I mean, you saw in Brazil qualifying, you know, Lewis and Russell on their qualifying laps coming out of the last corner onto the straight were both for 10th up on pole. By the time they get to their flag, they're 4 tenths down, you know what I mean? That's clearly been their main weakness. What we've seen in Las Vegas is Mercedes addressing that to an extent. Now, sure, they haven't solved this, of course not. That's going to take much more time, and over the winter they can develop this further, but it's showing good signs. If they're able to match now the Red Bulls and match the Ferraris in straight line speed and be able to run with them, sure, they're not the quickest in the corners, but they're there and thereabouts. They're not significantly losing out, and they're able to keep their tyres in check and preserve their tyre life, which we saw in the race as well with Lewis, who was quite quick on the hard tyres. Even in the last laps when he dispatched of Fernando Alonso and was even getting in the DRS of Carlos Sainz. So we saw the pace of the Mercedes clearly, right? You can see that they're making improvements, and it's a big step. I think it highlights for the team in Brackley now, they now know, look, we can address this straight line speed issue. And if they're already making, if one small upgrade, which James Allison called it, it wasn't a major upgrade, is able to make this type of performance gains. You know, you look at it's now 3 tracks, different tracks now, completely different tracks where the upgrade has performed very well. You just saw in what it done in Texas, Lewis almost won. People said it was plank wear, this, that, etc. We then went to Mexico again. Lewis was 2nd place, pumping in the fastest lap. George Russell as well, showing good performance in the car. And now we go over to Las Vegas, which you would think has the worst characteristics for the Mercedes W14, but here they are again showing pace. Now sure, they finished 7th and 8th, but I'm talking pure pace. Mercedes was actually likely the 2nd fastest car. If we take these sector times from Formula data analysis and we look at Max Verstappen, we take his 3 best sector times. His quickest lap was a 1:35.19, which is very quick and the quickest. And then we take Lewis Hamilton's quickest sector times, and his quickest is actually a 1:35.24. So that's just half a tenth of a second. Now sure, on average, you know, I'm not saying he'd be able to beat Verstappen today. You know, Verstappen was a different monster, but you know, it's demonstrating that they did have some pace, some inherent pace, which they weren't able to demonstrate for various reasons. Unlucky with the safety cars, punctures, and contact with Max and George, but it's showing inherent pace on low downforce track, and I think that bodes well for the future. I think this is going to help them make some huge steps going forward with the W15 and the Brackley team, who have even said quite recently that they've actually got some more power to come from the engine. I think that demonstrates the potential that we may see next year with the W15. I think we're likely to see a very fast car on the straights and very quick in the corners as well. It's going to be very interesting. You guys let me know in the comments what you think of the performance of the Mercedes in Las Vegas, and you guys let me know if you guys have any different opinions. I'd like to hear it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.